It was just after 7 in the evening when Angela Morris turned off the highway onto a quiet suburban road lined with oak trees and porch lights. The air was heavy with the kind of humidity that made the evening sky glow soft gold. She was on her way home from the base, still in uniform. Pressed fatigues, name tag neat, boots polished even after a long day of briefings. Angela was used to driving these back roads. They were quicker and quieter than the main streets. She liked the stillness, the smell of freshly cut grass, the way the world seemed to slow down after sunset. Her car, a dark grey sedan with government plates, moved smoothly through the curve. She was thinking about her daughter's school play that weekend and whether she'd have time to iron her uniform for the next morning's inspection. Ordinary thoughts, the kind that reminded her she was both a soldier and a mother. That peace broke when flashing blue lights filled her rearview mirror. Angela frowned. She checked her speed, 5 miles under the limit. She hadn't rolled through any stop signs or missed any signals. Still, she eased over to the side of the road, careful to signal, her military training keeping her movement steady and deliberate. The cruiser pulled up behind her, lights still flashing. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, thick around the middle, hand already resting on his holster. The other was younger, standing back, watching. Angela rolled her window down, resting her hands calmly on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer," she said politely. "Is there a problem?" The older one, his badge read Officer D. Hale, stopped just short of her window. "License and registration," he said curtly. She nodded and handed them over. "May I ask what this is about?" Hale glanced at the documents, then back at her. "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for. Black female, grey vehicle, seen speeding away from a convenience store theft about 15 minutes ago." Angela blinked. "A theft?" "That's right," he said, tone flat. "Step out of the vehicle." "Officer," she said evenly, "I've just come from Fort Parker military base. You can confirm that easily." He didn't respond. His hand tapped his holster again. "Out of the car, now." Angela felt her pulse quicken but forced herself to stay calm. She unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door and stepped out slowly. The younger officer shifted uneasily, glancing between them. "Turn around," Hale ordered. "Hands behind your head." She complied. Years of discipline had taught her the value of control, even when others lost theirs. "Down on your knees," he barked. That's when she looked up, her steady eyes meeting his. "Officer, with all due respect, I'm not resisting. I've identified myself. You have no reason to escalate this." Hale's voice hardened. "I said down." The sound of her boots against the pavement was sharp as she knelt, her heart pounding, not from fear but from disbelief. The younger cop shifted again, visibly uncomfortable now. "Sir," he muttered, "maybe we should verify—" "Stay out of it," Hale snapped. Angela could feel the grit of the road beneath her knees, her palms steady against the air. Somewhere in the distance a car slowed, watching, then drove off. She took a breath. Her tone remained calm, firm. "Officer Hale," she said, "look inside my wallet. Front pocket, left side. There's an ID card. I'll look when I'm ready." "Do it now," she said, her voice quiet but commanding. Something in her tone, the authority that years of command had carved into her voice, made him pause. He stepped back warily and pulled the wallet from the front seat. Flipping it open, his eyes scanned the ID, then froze. Across the top, in bold print, were the words, "United States Army." Beneath that, the seal, and then her name, Colonel Angela D. Morris. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them changed completely. The younger officer leaned forward, eyes widening. "Sir, she's military," he whispered. "High rank, too." Hale's face went pale. He looked from the card to the woman kneeling on the road, then back again. Angela stood slowly, brushing the dirt from her knees. She didn't raise her voice, didn't shout. She just looked him straight in the eye. "You know," she said quietly, "when I train new recruits, I tell them to respect authority, but also to use judgment. You had a choice tonight. You could have asked a question. You could have verified my ID, but you didn't. You decided what I was before I even spoke." Hale swallowed. Words stuck in his throat. She took the wallet from his trembling hand and slipped it back into her pocket. "You ever kneel on hot pavement before, officer?" she asked softly. "I have, overseas, for reasons that mattered." The younger officer looked stricken. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. This isn't—" Angela turned toward him, Son, I don't hold you responsible for someone else's fear, but learn from it. Because someday you'll have to decide whether to follow orders or do what's right. The older officer tried to speak, but the words never came out. She got back into her car, movements precise, calm. Before she closed the door, she looked at him one last time. Next time you see a uniform, she said, make sure you know what kind of courage you're talking to. She drove away, the hum of the engine fading into the night. Behind her, the two officers stood in silence, their cruiser lights still flashing against the empty road. Hale's hand dropped away from his holster, fingers trembling slightly. For the rest of his career, he would remember the look in her eyes. Not angry, not vengeful, but disappointed. It was the kind of look that stayed with a man longer than any reprimand ever could. Angela didn't tell anyone about the encounter that night. Not her daughter, not her commanding officer. She simply drove home, parked the car and sat for a while in the quiet. Then she unpinned her rank insignia, set it gently on the counter and poured herself a glass of water. To her, respect wasn't something worn on a uniform. It was something earned through dignity, especially when the world tried to strip it away. And that night, on a quiet suburban road, she hadn't lost an ounce of it. The following morning, the sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of Colonel Angela Morris's kitchen. The world outside was calm. Birds on power lines, the faint rumble of traffic in the distance, the smell of coffee brewing on the counter. It should have been an ordinary morning, one that began like any other. But the night before still lingered in her mind, like a bruise that hadn't yet formed. She sat at the table in her crisp uniform shirt, sleeves rolled neatly, her posture straight out of habit. Her daughter Leah shuffled into the kitchen in pajama pants and a messy bun, half asleep. "Morning, Mom," she mumbled. "Morning, sweetheart," Angela replied softly, forcing a smile. "Grab some breakfast before school." Leah poured cereal into a bowl, glancing at her mother curiously. "You're quiet this morning." Angela hesitated, watching the steam rise from her mug. "Just tired. Long day yesterday." Her daughter nodded, but the look on Angela's face didn't match the words. It wasn't fatigue, it was something else. The kind of weight she carried only when she'd seen something that didn't sit right with her. When Leah left for school, Angela sat for a long moment in the silence of the house. Then she opened her phone and began typing a report, not as a complaint but as documentation. Years in the military had trained her to record incidents factually, without emotion. She detailed the stop, the officer's name, the demand that she kneel, and the moment of recognition that followed. She ended the report with a simple line: "No disciplinary action requested. Recommend sensitivity training for local officers." Then she saved it, attached the file to an email addressed to the State Police Oversight Division, and hit send. Her intention wasn't revenge. She didn't want headlines or apologies. She wanted change, the kind that lasted beyond one embarrassing night. Later that morning, she arrived at Fort Parker Military Base, her car passing smoothly through the security gate. The guard saluted as she pulled up. "Good morning, Colonel Morris." She returned the salute with a nod, her tone composed. "Morning, Sergeant." Inside the base offices, the mood was as it always was, structured, busy, purposeful. The faint smell of coffee and copier ink lingered in the halls. She greeted colleagues, exchanged a few short words, then entered the operations wing. Her aide, Major Daniel Ortiz, looked up from a stack of reports. "Morning, ma'am." "You're early." Angela gave a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep." He caught the tone and frowned. "Something happen?" She hesitated. "Traffic stop last night." He waited, concern flickering in his eyes. "I got pulled over for matching a description," she said evenly. "Ended up on my knees on the road until they checked my ID." His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I handled it," she said quickly. "No harm done." "With respect, Colonel, that's not nothing," Ortiz said. "They humiliated a senior officer." "That's—" Angela shook her head. "That's not what matters. What matters is how they learn from it. I sent a report this morning. Not to punish, to fix." Ortiz studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You always take the high ground, ma'am." Angela's lips curved slightly. "It's higher for a reason. They spent the rest of the morning reviewing logistics and scheduling briefings for an upcoming community outreach program, a partnership between the base and local law enforcement, meant to improve communication and public trust. Ironically, Angela had been one of the key organizers. By afternoon, the memory of the night before had dulled slightly, replaced by the rhythm of her work. But just as she was preparing to leave for the day, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Redfield Police Department. "Captain Reynolds," she answered calmly. "Colonel Morris speaking." "Colonel, good afternoon," the voice said. "This is Captain Reynolds from Redfield PD. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened last night. Officer Hale has already filed his report. I assure you it's being handled internally." Angela's tone remained measured. "I appreciate that, Captain. My goal isn't discipline. It's understanding." "Of course," he said quickly. "We're scheduling a review session with our officers next week. If you'd be willing, I'd like to invite you to speak." That caught her off guard. "Speak?" "Yes, ma'am. About leadership, respect, and handling high-stress situations. It could help." Angela considered that for a long moment. The easy answer would have been no. She could have declined politely and left them to clean up their own mistakes. But that wasn't who she was. "All right," she said finally. "I'll come. Thank you, Colonel. We'll send the details." When she hung up, she exhaled slowly. It wasn't anger she felt. It was purpose, the kind that came when life handed her a choice between resentment and reform, and she chose the harder one. That evening, she went for a walk around her neighborhood. The sun was low, spilling golden light over the sidewalks. A few kids rode bikes, a neighbor waved, and for a moment, the world felt gentle again. She paused at the end of her driveway, looking down at her boots, the same ones that had been pressed into the rough pavement the night before. She thought about how quickly dignity could be challenged, how easily respect could be taken for granted, and then she thought about how power, used right, could restore both. By the time the sun set, she had already drafted her speech for next week's session. It wasn't about rank or authority. It was about humanity, about judgment, humility, and the difference between control and compassion, because she knew something the officers didn't yet understand. Real strength didn't come from a badge or a title. It came from knowing when not to use them. The following week, the community hall at Redfield Police Headquarters buzzed with a quiet tension that only comes when people know they're about to face something uncomfortable but necessary. Rows of uniformed officers filled the seats, their badges catching the glare of the fluorescent lights. The event had been listed as leadership and integrity in field response, but everyone knew what had prompted it. Colonel Angela Morris arrived right on time, her posture as sharp as her pressed uniform. When she entered, a few officers stood instinctively, unsure whether to salute. She gave a polite nod that said both thank you and stand easy. At the front of the room stood Captain Reynolds, who cleared his throat nervously as he introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Angela D. Morris, U.S. Army. She's agreed to speak with us today about professionalism, perspective, and respect. Please give her your full attention." Angela stepped forward, adjusting the microphone. Her tone was calm, deliberate, and steady, not a trace of bitterness or anger. "Good morning," she began. "I know some of you already know why I'm here. Last week I had an encounter with two of your officers. One made a mistake. The other tried to intervene. I'm not here to shame anyone or relive that moment. I'm here because mistakes, if you face them honestly, can build something stronger than punishment ever will." The room was silent. Angela let her gaze move across the faces in front of her. Young officers, veterans, supervisors. Some avoided her eyes. Others met her gaze directly, curious, guarded. "I've spent over 20 years in uniform," she continued. "I've led soldiers through combat zones, natural disasters, and humanitarian missions. I've learned that authority doesn't make you infallible. It tests your humility. It's not about who you control. It's about how you carry that control." A murmur moved through the room. She went on. "When you wear a uniform, people see the symbol before they see the person. That's true for me, and it's true for you. But that symbol means something only if we use it to protect, not to diminish." Her words were simple, but they landed with weight. Even the officers who'd entered skeptical were listening now. "I was asked to kneel on a roadside last week," she said plainly. The air shifted, uncomfortable, electric. I complied, because I know how quickly things can escalate. I also know that I didn't have to. I chose to cooperate because I believe peace should always be given a chance. But when that officer saw my ID and realized who I was, his entire body changed. Fear replaced authority. Shock replaced certainty. He realized something too late, that he'd judged me before he'd even spoken to me. She paused for a moment, letting that settle. "That moment," she said softly, "is what I want to talk about. Judgment before understanding. Power before perspective. You can't serve a community you don't see." One of the younger officers, seated near the front, raised his hand hesitantly. "Ma'am," he said, "how do you—" "Stop yourself from judging. It just happens sometimes. Instincts, training, adrenaline." Angela nodded. "That's a fair question. Judgment is natural. But discipline, real discipline, is choosing to pause before acting on it. It's asking yourself one question. If I'm wrong, what kind of harm could I cause? That 1 second of reflection can save someone's dignity. Or even their life." The room was still again. She continued, "In the army we train for quick response too. But we also train for moral courage, the courage to pause, to correct a fellow soldier, to admit when we've gone too far. I'd argue that takes more strength than any use of force ever could." From the back of the room, a voice spoke quietly. "Were you scared that night?" Angela turned toward the sound. The voice belonged to the younger officer who'd been there, the one who had tried unsuccessfully to stop his partner from escalating. His name tag read Patel. His expression was heavy, regret written in his eyes. "No," Angela said truthfully, "but I was disappointed. Not just in the officer, in how common that moment has become." Patel lowered his head slightly. She caught his eye and added gently, "But I saw you that night. You hesitated. You wanted to do the right thing. Don't lose that instinct. Head matters." A faint murmur rippled across the room again, but this time it carried something different. Reflection. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "Colonel," he said quietly, "if you could tell every officer here one thing to take with them today, what would it be?" Angela didn't hesitate. "Never forget that authority is borrowed. Every time you put on that badge, you're borrowing the community's trust. It's not yours to keep. It's yours to honor." The room was silent for several long seconds. Then, one by one, officers began to nod. When the session ended, several stayed behind to shake her hand. A few simply said thank you. Others stood quietly, still thinking. The younger officer, Patel, approached her last. "Ma'am," he said, voice quiet, "I wanted to apologize again for not speaking up louder that night." Angela looked at him and smiled gently. "You spoke enough for me to remember you. Next time, speak for yourself. That's how we change things." He nodded, his shoulders straightening as he walked away. As she left the building, the autumn air was crisp and clear. The parking lot glimmered faintly with sunlight bouncing off windshields. She could see her reflection in her car door. Uniformed, calm, steady. She wasn't proud of what had happened that night, but she was proud of what came after, because she knew that sometimes justice didn't arrive in courtrooms or through punishment. Sometimes it arrived in rooms like this, in the quiet moment when a person truly understood what they'd done wrong and decided to be better. Angela got into her car, started the engine, and took a slow breath before pulling out of the lot. She didn't need applause or recognition. What mattered was that the next person pulled over on that same road might meet a more patient officer, one who'd learned from her silence, her restraint, and her strength. As she merged onto the highway, the late afternoon sun cast a soft glow across the road ahead, and for the first time since that night, she felt lighter. Sometimes, dignity didn't demand a fight. Sometimes, it just needed to stand its ground and speak. 2 weeks after her talk at the Redfield Police Department, Colonel Angela Morris stood outside her daughter's school gymnasium, waiting for the doors to open for the evening play. The cool air brushed against her face, and she could smell the faint scent of popcorn and paper programs drifting from inside. She wore a plain navy sweater and jeans, no uniform, no insignia, just herself. It had been a long couple of weeks, full of quiet reflection. The department had followed through on its promises: new sensitivity training, revised field conduct guidelines, and mentorship programs between military personnel and local law enforcement. The news had picked up her story briefly, calling it an act of grace under pressure. But Angela hadn't done interviews. She wasn't interested in headlines. She was interested in the outcome. When the doors finally opened, she stepped inside, joining the hum of parents and students filling the small gym. The stage curtain was still closed, the chatter loud, the air full of the nervous energy that only kids could create. She spotted Leah near the stage, dressed in her costume, a simple white dress and a cardboard crown slightly askew. Leah waved enthusiastically when she saw her. "Mom," Angela smiled, lifting her hand in return. "You look beautiful," she mouthed. The play started soon after. It was about kindness, children portraying strangers helping each other in small but meaningful ways. When Leah stepped forward to deliver her line, "Sometimes doing the right thing starts with just stopping to listen," Angela felt her throat tighten. That simple sentence carried more truth than most adult conversations she'd had in years. After the show, parents crowded around their kids, congratulating them, taking photos. Angela waited patiently until Leah ran up to her, grinning ear to ear. "Did you see me, Mum?" "I saw you," Angela said, kneeling down to straighten her daughter's crown. "You were perfect," Leah beamed. "We're going to the diner after." "Can we go?" "Sure," Angela said with a soft laugh. "You earned it." They drove together to a small diner just outside of town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that smelled stronger than it tasted. They slid into a booth near the window, ordering pancakes and milkshakes despite the hour. As they waited for their food, Angela noticed two police officers at the counter paying for their meals. One of them turned slightly, and recognition flickered across his face. It was Officer Patel, the younger man from that night, the one who'd looked torn between obedience and conscience. He hesitated, then approached their table. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "Colonel Morris, right?" Angela nodded. "Evening, Officer Patel," he smiled nervously. "Didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to thank you again for how you handled everything. I've been trying to do better. Thinking before acting." "I believe you," Angela said. "And I'm glad." He nodded, then glanced at Leah, smiling softly. "Your mom's a strong woman," he said. Leah grinned proudly. "I know, she's in the army," Patel chuckled. "That explains it." When he left, Angela sat for a moment, watching him and his partner walk out into the night. Something quiet and satisfying filled her chest, a sense of closure not from punishment, but from growth. Their food arrived, and Leah dove into her pancakes, syrup dripping from her fork. Angela smiled, resting her chin on her hand as she watched her daughter chatter about the play, about her friends, about the simple joys of childhood untouched by the heaviness of the world. And for the first time in weeks, Angela felt peace. The next morning, she received an email from Captain Reynolds, "Colonel Morris. Just wanted you to know that our department completed its first leadership and empathy workshop yesterday. Officer Hale requested to attend voluntarily. He asked to read a statement to the room about accountability. It was heartfelt. Your words reached him more than you realize. Respectfully, Captain Reynolds." Angela read the message twice, then set her phone down, staring out the window at the morning sun. The road outside shimmered faintly from the light, the same kind of road where everything had changed for her that night. She realized something profound then. She hadn't just defended her dignity that evening, she'd redefined it. Dignity wasn't about demanding recognition. It was about standing so tall in truth that others had no choice but to see it. That evening she walked through her neighborhood again, this time in a simple t-shirt, her dog trotting beside her. The air was still, filled with the hum of cicadas and the smell of cut grass. She passed the same stretch of road where she'd once been forced to kneel. Now she stopped there just for a moment, her hands in her pockets. The memory no longer burned. It simply was, a moment that had turned into movement, a small injustice that had grown into awareness. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Check my rank, huh?" Not out of bitterness, but with quiet pride, because her rank had never been about metal bars or salutes. It had always been about composure, integrity, and the courage to act without anger. When she turned to head home, the streetlights flickered on one by one, glowing softly against the evening sky. Each light, she thought, was like a small act of respect, bright, ordinary, and enough to change the dark.